Hello and welcome to Raj Sabha Television. I am Akhilesh Suman and you are watching India's Foreign Policy 2019. In this episode of India's Foreign Policy 2019, we are going to show you the major contours of Indian foreign policy, the challenges, opportunities and the upswings in the policy. Indeed, India is the largest democracy and one of the most diverse economies and societies in the world, and India has seen many challenges. It negotiated and also it asserted well.
Year 2019 marked a significant step in India's foreign policy when on November 5th, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced in Bangkok that India is coming out of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. The news surprised many in India, but foreign powers were clearly shocked by a stand that categorically stated that Indian market will not be a dumping ground or be open to irrational trade. This was the first time that India had opted out of a multilateral negotiation in order to safeguard its long-term foreign policy interest. The Prime Minister's declaration in this respect was also an assertion of India's independent foreign policy, unequivocally based on domestic requirements and priorities.
Primarily, it was the issue of rules of origin, because as you know, we have a trade deficit of $107 billion combined with the RCEP partners. China itself constitutes $53 billion. And if China were able to use, which it has been using in the past, countries like Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam, for exporting to India, then obviously you circumvent the rules of origin.
India also announced that past free trade agreements with other countries will be reviewed, which meant that India will no more be a grazing ground for stray capital or for unreasonable trade of goods on unequal terms, devoid of reciprocity. This was a resurgent India that will no more compromise without due benefits accruing to Indian people and its business class. Many a times in the past, Indian farmers had complained about the harm that free trade between India and many countries was causing to them.
आसियान इंडिया एफटीए की समीक्षा के निर्णय का स्वागत करता हूं। इससे हमारे आर्थिक संबंध न सिर्फ और मजबूत बनेंगे, बल्कि हमारा व्यापार भी और बैलेंस होगा। मैरीटाइम सुरक्षा, ब्लू इकोनॉमी और मानवीय सहायता के क्षेत्रों में भी अपने साझेदारी को हम मजबूत बनाना चाहते हैं।
The new assertiveness in India's foreign policy was a reflective of resounding electoral victory that the NDA government led by Prime Minister Modi had won earlier this year. It was also an expression of the concern of Prime Minister himself, who had been shaping major contours of global issues by setting up a deeply personal connection with the world leaders, and in the process, creating an impact for India's foreign policy initiatives across the globe.
To Prime Minister Modi, to President Trump, welcome to Texas.
India's impact was so obvious and so apparent that despite differences on few trade issues, US President Donald Trump chose to attend the Howdy Modi program in Houston.
Good morning, Houston. He needs no introduction. When I met him for the first time, he said to me, India has a true friend in White House.
A program was organized by Indians in US solely to welcome Prime Minister Modi. Trump not only attended the gathering but also addressed the crowd of Indians who were cheering for Prime Minister Modi.
I am so thrilled to be here in the great state of Texas with one of America's greatest, most devoted, and most loyal friends, Prime Minister Modi of India. Thank you. Prime Minister Modi, I look forward to working with you to make our nations even more prosperous than ever before.
At the event, it wasn't just the presence of US President. Also in evidence was the bipartisanship of American political class, where even Democrat leaders had come to greet Modi. It marked a realization of convergence of political and economic interests between India and US at a time when China is projecting itself as a sole power in the Asian region.
The Republicans and the Democrats, they came, they walked across party lines to vote for India. And similarly, even in India, if you've noticed, we may have our differences, but there is a continuity in policy as far as towards the United States.
The US-India understanding went much further. Beyond normal diplomatic niceties, both nations engaged in 2+2 ministerial meetings in the course of the year. Foreign and defense ministers of both countries discussed and planned cooperation on global issues of mutual concern. This was in many ways the fructification of the process of understanding that began with Jaswant Singh and Stroop Talbot talks as far as back in 1990s.
The talks have covered a wide range of security issues, arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation issues, as well as regional and international developments.
These visuals tell us the level of Indo-US understanding. The two foreign ministers and two defense ministers of India and US pledging to work together to promote joint interest in security, defense, freedom of navigation, and prosperous Indo-Pacific.
We exchange views on various global and regional issues of mutual interest, including our partnership in multilateral fora. I'm very grateful to Secretary Pompeo for reiterating the U.S. government's support to the Chabahar project, which will immensely benefit Afghanistan. The content and quality of our discussions today were commensurate with and reflective of the broad expanse of our ties.
Leaders of our two nations are working diligently to protect the American people, to develop a relationship that's important strategically for the coming decades between the United States and India, and we won't let the noise and the silliness here in Washington, D.C. distract us from that.
Even as the diplomatic and strategic understanding with US attained new heights, 2019 witnessed India's first 2+2 ministerial meetings with Japan as well in Delhi.
India has been wanting to do more with Japan in the nuclear sphere to get the nuclear technology, and also in maritime defense hardware, to get the U-2 amphibious boats. But somehow this has not translated, and that is the reason why it is felt that the 2+2 would help the Japanese civil part of their administration understand better the needs and requirements of the military part.
There was also a first official level 2+2 with Australia to evolve an understanding on major strategic issues. This will soon be upgraded into 2+2 ministerial meet. With this, the bonds of cooperation on defense and foreign policies will connect India to all other members of the Quad. Australia, like Japan, is major military power in Indo-Pacific region, and although it has significant business relations with China, it's willing to create a multipolar Asia with India.
Quad has virtually become a grouping of mature democracies in the world. And even though they have very good relationship with China as far as business is concerned, but they have decided to come together with India to challenge any monopolistic attitude as far as use of common resources like marine resources, freedom of navigation, etc. So in that way, Quad is evolving and developing in a very good way so that peace and tranquility can be established in Indo-Pacific region, and not only in Indo-Pacific region but also in the whole Asia.
Relations with France continue to remain in upswing in 2019. France supported India on all global fora, including the UN Security Council. The year even marked France starting its supplies of Rafale fighter jet that will give India enormous strategic depth against unfriendly neighbors like Pakistan. French President Emmanuel Macron invited Prime Minister Modi to attend G7 summit irrespective of the fact that India is not a power of the grouping of most developed economies of the world.
France wants to elevate the relationship with India to a global level. India too is reciprocating it. It is seeking a global partnership with France, not just bilateral partnership. The bilateral partnership with France has always been solid. You know, France has been like Soviet Union. France has been one of the strategic partners of India even before the formal strategic partnership was signed. So they want to, both sides want to elevate into the next level, which includes cooperation in Africa and Indian Ocean region.
While on one hand, India has been creating a coalition of like-minded regional powers like Japan, Australia, South Korea, and even a world power like America, it also kept sensitizing the Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean nations about their sovereignty, self-reliance, and strategic freedom. India has cautioned the Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean nations to be wary of debt trap. To elaborate its vision, the External Affairs Ministry on 13th and 14th December organized a conference in Delhi for Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific nations to create an understanding on common security challenges and development opportunities.
The Indo-Pacific concept is not tomorrow's forecast, but yesterday's reality. Others speaking here these past 2 days have variously made the same point, which is in short, economic and civilizational impulses link the eastern and southern shores of Africa through the Gulf, the Arabian Sea island nations, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. We can certainly say that this is the way it has always been in our region, and perhaps this is as it should be.
The security of a country does not solely depend on how secure your borders are. It also depends on what type of relationship do you have with your neighboring countries. India in this context has performed exemplarily with creating an understanding on the security issues with the neighboring countries, be it Bangladesh, be it Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives or Sri Lanka, and also in the Pacific Ocean countries.
Sensitive to the fact that countries like Maldives and Sri Lanka had got themselves into a dangerous debt trap in recent years by taking help from China to finance their infrastructure needs, India offered them to develop assistance for projects of their own choice. India strengthened its neighborhood first policy with Prime Minister Modi visiting these countries soon after taking oath of office in his second term in May 2019. In India's immediate neighborhood, the Prime Minister first visited Maldives, then Sri Lanka, followed by Bhutan to cement bilateral ties with India.
India has offered budgetary assistance of more than $1.4 billion to help with the problems Maldives has been facing ever since China kind of lured it into a debt trap. So these are some of the examples. I mean, there have been other examples like, the development projects that have been taken up in countries like Nepal or Bangladesh. Several projects have been launched for either for management of water resources or for better connectivity.
Maldives and Sri Lanka are important for India, both for extended security as well as domestic peace. Prime Minister Modi's visit was reciprocated by both Maldivian President Mohammad Salih and Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who made India the first port of call after taking oath of their respective offices. Their actions assured India that both neighbors will not be misused by anti-India powers.
These may not look very significant, but these are definitely gestures that show that the neighbors are reciprocating. I would assume that in most of these countries, they would certainly keep India's interests more in mind when they would have to, take decisions.
In its neighborhood first policy, Nepal and Bhutan are two countries that figure prominently in India's scheme of things. There were two ministerial meetings from both sides this year. In defense, official level and NSA level visits also took place. India has assured Bhutan through prime ministerial visit from both sides that assistance for its security and development will be continued and enhanced as well.
India has developed exemplary relationship with Bangladesh as far as development issues are concerned, connectivity issues are concerned, and security and defense relations are concerned. But because of some domestic issues in India, Bangladesh is a bit skeptical. and in next year it will be a challenge for India to persuade Bangladesh to understand India's internal necessities.
On the sidelines of ASEAN's summit in Bangkok on 4th November, Prime Minister Modi met Myanmar's de facto Prime Minister, its State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. While Myanmar has pledged to act against anti-India insurgent groups, India stood firm by Myanmar's side when the global community tried to isolate Aung San Suu Kyi on the issue of Rohingyas. In return, got it to shield the northeastern states from militant group like NSCN.
India offered to resolve the issue by resettlement, and we offered aid. We delivered on that. As you can see, there's been progress on the ground where the colonies have come up at a fast pace, I would say. And at the same time, we also spoke to Bangladesh. We spoke to other countries concerned to resolve this issue through diplomatic means. And of course, as far as the leadership is concerned, Aung San Suu Kyi is concerned, I think we maintained good relations by making sure that the opprobrium did not fall on her, because after all she works in a certain atmosphere, and there is also the other officials from the military who are involved.
India also maintained its best relations with Gulf nations and Arab world. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and United Arab Emirates have all felicitated Prime Minister Modi with the highest civilian awards. All of them are important Islamic world leaders who have the resources, the capacity to invest and the clout to rein in even radical elements.
I think he's been very frank and open in his dialogue with the Middle East leadership. And quite clearly, India has reached out to the Middle East countries, and this change has come about because these countries see a sincerity of purpose in the Indian approach. There is also a growing convergence on security issues in the region.
A major diplomatic milestone this year for India was the opening of Kartarpur Corridor. This was an age-old demand of Sikhs in India to enable access to a shrine where Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji spent the last 18 years of his life. The corridor connects India's Gurdaspur to Pakistan's Kartarpur. Any Indian with an identity card can now use the open corridor without a formal visa by spending $20. It proved to be another prime example of deft handling by India diplomatic establishment amid heightened tension with Pakistan.
I was among the journalists that visited Pakistan when Prime Minister Imran Khan inaugurated the work on the Kartarpur corridor. And since that time, and the time when this corridor actually opened this year, there was a considerable amount of skepticism whether the two countries would be able to overcome their differences and go ahead with this corridor. Even at the last minute, there were still problems. There were at times, India even called off meetings. But I think, to the credit of both countries, they have been able to go ahead with this project, which is very, very meaningful, especially for the Sikh community in India. For the first time, the Sikh community gets access to a very important shrine of their religion without even having to take visas.
On terrorism, India didn't hesitate to use its strategic resources to put Pakistan on the defensive. To the Pulwama terror attack by Jaish-e-Mohammed, India responded with tremendous attack on terror camps inside Pakistan's Balakot and killed many terrorists. At another level, the Financial Action Task Force put Pakistan on the grey list with a warning that Islamabad could go on the blacklist that could impact its ability to take loans from international organizations.
But I think the decisions like bodies like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, also reflect the growing disenchantment and the growing concerns of the world community about Pakistan being one of the places from where terrorism originates and causes problems around the world. It's not just India which is now saying it. I think even people in the Western countries realize how Pakistan has been pushing terrorism not only into India but also into Afghanistan. People who are linked to attacks have been traced back. Their origins are either in Pakistan or they trained for some time in Pakistan.
On Jaish-e-Mohammed, India got China to withhold its veto and allow the UNSC 1267 to put JEM chief Azhar Masood on the list of international terrorists.
After the Pulwama attack, it was by and large clear that Jaish-e-Mohammed was behind this incident. And Maulana Masood Azhar, being the head of this group, played a key role into it. India immediately moved in the UN Security Council to ban him. France played for India. Other members of the UN Security Council, including countries from OIC, and particularly Indonesia, which was the head of the 1267 committee, took a very strong stand. China initially was not positive and did not support India, if you remember. But finally, it came, it realized that it is getting isolated.
In 2019, Prime Minister also held his second informal summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. While China is trying to lead a unipolar Asia, India has been advocating for both a multipolar world as well as a multipolar Asia. The challenge has been to keep cooperation with China going even as it tried to keep Beijing's expansive interest in check.
So informal summit is important for understanding at the leadership level. If there's understanding at the leadership level, it can percolate down to the lower level. So they gave a broad direction, and more importantly, it helps to stabilize the relation. So the status quo is maintained, and the status quo at the border is maintained. So that is very important, both from the Chinese viewpoint and Indian viewpoint. So this actually helps to keep stability.
Relations with Russia reached a new height when for the first time India announced a $1 billion line of credit to Far East Russia for its development needs. This expanded the horizon of India-Russia relations, extending its cooperation in defense to other fields like investment and human resources in Russian agriculture sector.
For India, there is a huge potential in the diamond industry, in the agriculture, in the connectivity sector, in infrastructure, particularly in the Far East, where Russia seeks infrastructure to balance China, which is not very pronounced, but it's part of a understated strategy of Moscow. So India is helping Russia to emerge as a power in the Pacific and trying to bring Russia into its Indo-Pacific strategy.
Even as it continued its effort to grow closer to US, India asserted its diplomatic priorities in purchasing S-400 missile defense system from Russia, in the process shrugging off American pressure to avoid the deal.
It's probably one of those few countries, which has defense equipment and advanced equipment from both adversarial powers, right? But it has been made very clear, including Dr. Jaishankar's recent visit to US, where CATSA was discussed, that India will maintain its strategic autonomy. Nobody can dictate terms to India as to where it is going to procure its arms. And there is a dependency factor, there's a trust factor with Russia. While there is a growing dependency and the trust factor with US, India can manage both these, and India has assured US that its procurement from Russia will not impact any of India's defense equipment from US and vice versa.
In 2019, Indian diplomacy effectively blunted Pakistani propaganda on Kashmir. Pakistan tried very hard to mobilize world opinion against the abrogation of Article 370 and the division of Jammu and Kashmir into the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh. When it got no support from any major country other than China, Beijing tried to raise the issue with the United Nations Security Council, but no other member supported it. Pakistan stood totally isolated on Kashmir, even when Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates failed to back it.
Pakistan in this regard got no support from any major country other than China, Malaysia and Turkey. Beijing tried to raise the issue in United Nations Security Council, but it was the deft handling of India's foreign policy that no country in the P5 or also in the expanded United Nations Security Council supported Beijing's stand on the issue of terrorism and Jammu and Kashmir.
Moreover, disregarding Pakistani opposition, the Organization of Islamic Countries invited then External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj as guest of honor to speak in inaugural session of OIC in Abu Dhabi in February 2019. This marked a great recognition for India's pragmatic foreign policy by the Islamic world and oil-rich countries.
It is also the outcome of this government's engagement with players such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia and some of the other smaller countries in the Arab world, and how India has forged very strong energy security linkages with these countries, how India has formed very strong security linkages with these countries. And let us not forget, the Middle East is home to almost 8 million Indians who are living and working there.
Africa remained the cornerstone of India's foreign policy when it extended an all-out support to financially deprived African countries. Year 2019 started with visit of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to India in January. It ended with Vice President Venkaiah Naidu's visit to countries like Zambia in August, Comoros and Sierra Leone in October. India also got all support from African countries at multiple fora, including the United Nations.
I think we have gone one step ahead with the relationship with Africa because if you see that India decided to open new missions in Africa, India has also set up the convention center in Niger as part of its plan for 20 such centers across Africa. They have reinvigorated the defense relationship with Africa. India is India is probably the oldest partner for Africa in defense training, which remains unknown in today's geopolitical scenario. And in 2019 we are expecting the 4th edition of India-Africa Summit.
India also took part at G20 meeting in Japan's Osaka city, where it took part in first summit-level trilateral meeting with US President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. On 28 June 2019, Prime Minister Modi gave acronym J, Japan, America and India to this informal meeting.
India wants to be, as a global player, as an emerging global player, India wants to be part of most of these global groupings to shape decision making, to understand the developments in that particular region. See, every of these grouping is in a particular geometry, So from Indian viewpoint, it is not that if India is a member of Quad, India is also a member of RIC.
When it came to multilateral fora, the SCO summit in Bishkek and BRICS summit in Brazil proved to be successful meets from India's perspective. Given its close association with Latin America, India invited Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro as chief guest at Republic Day in 2020.
Brazil is emerging as a strong partner in the BRICS. Somewhere, Bolsonaro wants to develop the relationship with India. If you recall that a few months back, he announced visa-free entry for Indians into Brazil, which encourages Indian investments, Indian tourists to Brazil.
The many significant steps taken by Indian foreign policy in 2019 in fact traced their evolution over the last 5 years. Explaining this fundamental shift, Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale said, and I quote, "India has moved from its non-aligned past. India today is aligned state, but based on issues." Underscoring the fact that it was time for India to become part of global rule-making process, Gokhale said, in the rules-based order, India would have a stronger position in multilateral institutions. This evolution underlines an assertive India that has moved many miles closer to achieving the permanent membership of UN Security Council. It reverberated in External Affairs Minister S. J. Shankar's assertion on the floor of Rajya Sabha in its December session that India will achieve the permanent membership.
So this was the India's foreign policy in the year 2019, and it is evident that India had asserted. And if you assert, you will have challenges and opportunities both. It seems 2020 will be having more challenges, but it will also have more opportunities. Akhilesh Suman for Rajya Sabha Television with camera person Raj Thakur in Delhi.